Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today we're talking to Dr. Ravi from New Trail Consulting. How are you doing today, Dr. Ravi?
I'm doing fine, Ken. Thank you.
I'm excited to get into what it is that New Trail Consulting does. But before we jump into what it is that you're currently doing, can you give us just a little bit of background story about who you are and how you got your business life started?
Yeah, so my name is Ravi Vinayak, and I started New Trail Consulting back in 2005 when I got laid off from my job at that time. So I didn't know what to do, but I had a significant background in life sciences, and that's the industry I worked in. I worked in business development, sales and marketing. So I initially started out doing some consulting for some international companies in Japan and Korea who were trying to license some technologies from some of the US universities. But that in itself gave me a significant amount of challenge that I had to be on my toes all the time. And I had to look for a new opportunity every so on and so forth. But then came a time in 2010 or so when, I was asked by a company in the United States to help find distribution opportunities overseas. They had a decent business in America, but they said they want to expand into an international market. And they asked me if I would be a part of their team. And so I took that as a challenge and decided to work with this company in finding international distributors, players where we can launch their products overseas. And that after 1 or 2 years of doing that, it gave me a lot of confidence that I could expand this into a business where I can help other life sciences, biotech companies in expanding their reach worldwide. So what New Trail Consulting does is we look at the product, we look at the opportunity in the biotech life sciences space, we look at potential partners across the globe and across the 5 continents whom we can contact with, and we work with them to make it a win-win situation for them as well as for the parent company so that they can work with these guys in expanding the reach, talking to some key opinion leaders in those countries, and sell more products. So basically, I operate as a distribution channel manager where we can leverage the expertise of my company into finding the appropriate talent companies to expand products globally.
Very interesting. So I read a little bit of your bio and we talked a little bit before we jumped on the show, and you had made a statement about, opportunity, chasing opportunity, and there's always a new opportunity, right? And you landed on one of the opportunities that you brought to the international market had a little bit more of a personal story with an injury. Can you share a little bit about that with us and how having a personal connection to a product helps you really launch that in a different kind of way?
Yeah, so my first opportunity in the distribution space was from a US-based company that manufactures these laser therapy machines. What the machine does is, before I get into that, I used to run 6-7 miles a day, just about, for the last, say from 2001 until 2010, I used to run 6-7 miles a day. But there came a point in 2010 where I couldn't walk 60 feet. And I just had knee pain in both my knees. And my doctor said that, I need arthroscopic knee surgery. There's some debris in your knee. And, you need to go through therapy and other things, which sort of scared me. And I said, I don't want to go through that. So one thing led to another. And I landed up at a chiropractor's office, and he said, I can get rid of your knee pain in about 4 to 6 sittings. So whatever the chiropractor does, he did. And then finally what he did was he took a laser, what they called a cold laser. he shined it on my knees, for like 2 minutes without contacting my knee, and nothing happened the first two times. But by the time I went to the fifth time with him, all my knee pain had disappeared. So I used to get knee pain, a significant knee pain in both my knees on a long international flight, and that was one of the reasons I couldn't travel. So I found this very interesting because for the last 12 years, since I have had this cold laser therapy, I haven't had any significant knee pain, and I'm able to live a normal life. So what I did was I asked him who manufactures this and what this technology is. So cut to the chase, I contacted the company that manufactured this instrument and asked them what they're going to be doing internationally. Do they have an overseas market? And they said we don't have an overseas market yet. We just launched the machine in the United States. So can you help us launch this product overseas? So so they asked me to become. They could not give me the machine because I wasn't a trained laser technician. So I had to go through and take some courses, become a laser technician, because it's a very high powered laser unit. And 3 months later, I was traveling overseas with this instrument and working with other physical therapists and some of the arthroscopic knee surgeons in helping people who was having tennis elbow, neck pain, knee pain, and shining the knee. But although I don't have a medical background, I worked with physical therapists who could tell me where to work the laser with, and I was able to help a lot of people get rid of their pain. And at the same time, since I couldn't do this as a living, I found one or two distributors in overseas countries who then took upon the challenge of registering this product in their country and spreading the message. So this was my first initiation, and hence having undergone knee pain and having overcome knee pain, I saw the advantages of this machine. It has a lot of the reason behind I like this is because it has a lot of chemistry and physics, which I have a lot of background. So I was able to understand and explain to the end user how the machine works, and being an FDA approved product, it was easy to get an overseas market. So this was my first entry into distribution channel management. And after that, after having experienced success with that channel, where the business expanded in several other continents beside the United States, I then came back and reanalyzed myself and see, can I do this for other life science biotech companies that I work with, which is in my comfort zone? And the answer came back to be a yes. It was a growing market and it continues to be one. So I landed up working with many companies that operate in life sciences, research instruments, diagnostics, and so on and so forth. Many mid-size and small companies who don't have the ability to hire or have resources overseas. So I was their international arm and helping identify, sourcing, and selling the products overseas. And that's the business that I'm currently into.
Wonderful. Going back to the knee just for a second, I know this isn't about your business. So when you go back to the traditional surgeons today and they do the x-rays and the MRIs, do they still recommend surgery or do they say that you're healed?
Well, in general, a doctor always recommends surgery. But if somebody having a chronic pain, acute pain, and if somebody who is significantly old, don't want to go through the knee pain and having the rehab, this is a try that they can do. I mean, if you have severe pain, your pain might go away in 10 sittings, but if you have really chronic pain, then it might take about 20 sittings to find some relief. Right. But it's definitely an option to consider before you go in for a surgery. Surgery is not beneficial in some cases, and this is a high-powered laser that doesn't, in fact, it doesn't burn your skin. It's a non-contact. The laser waves penetrate through your through the bones, and what it does is it regenerates the adenosine triphosphate, or the ATP, in the cells. And the older you are and the more chronic the pain you are, the generation of this ATP is slow. So, in younger patients, people having just started encountering knee pain, joint pains, tennis elbow, and many of the joint related pains, they can get rid of it in a few sittings, but it's definitely something to consider before going in for surgery.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to either one of those technologies. I've had plenty of surgeries, and I use a lot of light therapy, laser therapy, cold therapy, heat therapy, all of those therapies in my life to help me get through. So you're right. Anytime that you can avoid the surgery and maintain
Yeah.
a healthy, happy, pain-free life, it's well worth it. The recovery from the surgery and the drugs they put you on are just very, very intrusive. So
Yeah, drugs, the physical therapy, it's a lot of pain. And in this particular case, I think having an alternative to consider before you go in for the latter is definitely worth it.
right.
And in my case, it was worth it because, I had so much knee pain. I did a lot of those therapies you spoke about, took a lot of drugs, didn't alleviate any of my pain, but this high-powered laser therapy really seemed to have done magic on my knees.
All right, now back to business, Dr. Ravi. Right, you've got New Trail Consulting. You're helping life science, bioscience companies bring their products to an international market.
Yes.
Some of these companies have huge budgets, right? Big pharmaceutical companies, but you said some of the smaller guys, independents.
Yeah.
Can you describe, if somebody's watching, like who would the client be that you could give the biggest bang to, right? Like the biggest win for you, the one that you would love to work with the most? Who are you looking for?
Yeah, typically we work with small companies who are startups, or mid-sized companies who are just about to launch a product. In research products, United States is the biggest market, but in diagnostics, although the United States is a bigger market, time to get approval through the facility, through some of the labs here, takes a lot of time, like the FDA and the other approval that you need. So in many cases, companies launch their product, especially the diagnostic products, overseas in some of the low-hanging fruit markets, and see what the acceptance is, what some of the challenges are, because the criteria for introduction of some of these newer diagnostic products, testing products like the COVID testing, or any other disease testing, the barriers are low for entry in some of the international countries. So we can test these markets out and get the learning from those markets, and then make a difference in the US before we submit for approval. And that's about the diagnostic companies. But for life science research companies who do reagents, who sell to universities who are doing research in, say, cancer research, or any kind of biological, genomic, proteomic research, these guys, can sell through some of the larger channels in the US, but overseas, nobody knows them. So, how do you launch a product overseas? So what we need to do is identify a partner in each of those countries that you're really interested in, which are considered the biggest market outside of the United States. For example, Germany, the UK, Japan, China. How do you start selling a product overseas? So having worked with a lot of these channel partners overseas, we narrow it down to 3 or 4 players, 3 or 4 companies in those territories. We contact with them. We give a pitch to them about what this US company does. Who are some of the potential customers, how this product fits into a research portfolio or a diagnostic portfolio, and see if they have interest in launching these products. So that vetting process takes anywhere between 3 to 6 months. And once we have identified a suitable partner, we then make the connection between that partner and the host company or the principal company, and the business gets started. Many of these products needs to be registered. They need to pay the custom duties, the VATs in those countries, And so those are some of the things that they facilitate by having a local partner on the ground. So that's how the process works. So in general, the big companies have people on the ground. They have their own operations in those countries, and they don't really need somebody like me or somebody like New Trail Consulting. But it's the smaller guys, the mid-sized companies who would tremendously benefit from this kind of business opportunity, expanding the business overseas.
So going back to the laser, you had to educate yourself on the product, right? You had to take classes. You made what I would consider a pretty significant investment on learning the technology as a risk to be able to set up distribution channels for this particular product. And
Correct.
for me, I know that I have, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners have this shiny ball syndrome, right? Where we see this thing and we want to go chase it, and we're intrigued and we're very curious and we're always running. Obviously, when it's something like the laser that you have a very significant personal use for, it's really easy to align yourself with that product and sell it, right? How do you make the decision on what you're going to lean into when you don't have a significant personal story like the laser for your knee, right? You're going to make these significant investments into them. What are some of the things that you use or tricks that you use to make sure that you're putting your efforts in the right direction? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that particular thing.
Yeah, so in my case, I have a background in biology, chemistry. I have a PhD in chemistry, and I've expanded into the first 15 years of my professional life. I worked with many companies doing genomic research. So I have a background. So I sort of stay close to my comfort zone or where I can make a significant contribution. But having been there, done that in my previous life, I take time to understand the new technology that a company brings in, how that fits into the current research settings, if there's really a market. So I keep abreast of a lot of, by reading a lot of journals, a lot of technical papers, white papers, and there are, when you do a Google search on a particular technology, it gives you a lot of information. So I try to study and educate myself before I approach a company or a company approaches me. So we do this analysis, back and forth analysis, a SWOT analysis for like over a month before I decide whether it's worth it for me to invest my time and effort into that company. And also at the same time to see if this technology is only applicable in the US or if it's generic enough that we can expand overseas into some of the top markets. So so once I understand and once I invest a little bit of time into understanding the technology, how it fits in, where it fits in, what kind of the workflow it has, whether it's upstream or downstream, I then initiate a brief dialogue with some of my key partners overseas that I worked with on many times and see what they think of it. And when I have their feedback, then I dialogue with the company and see if they're able to address some of their concerns. And if the answer is yes, if they think that they can overcome these issues, then I will take time and money and in my time invest in those technologies and then make it work for both parties. I mean, if personally I believe there's no opportunity, or if I can't make a significant contribution, it's just going to be a waste of time, then I don't want to waste my time as well as anybody else's time.
Right. Okay. Now, we all know that we have a lot of ideas and we can do the research and everything on paper looks like this is a no-brainer and you make the decision to move forward. And we know that not every decision that we make to move forward, we end up knocking it out of the park, right? And I think that the narrative of the overnight success is so wild in America, but most overnight successes we know take 5, 10, 20 years.
Exactly.
How do you consult with the client to say, hey, everything looked right on paper. we've given it a good college try. This just isn't going to work. We need to sunset this or try a different approach. How do you know that that's the time to make those decisions?
Yeah, as you said, the success is not immediate. It takes 1 or 2 years at least before we see a significant uptick. So the first year, at least in this research space, diagnostic space, is to understand the customer, understand the overseas market, and gradually introduce the product. And the first year sales are basically very less, but year 2 onwards, we expect our partners to make investment in those technologies too. But in some cases, it just doesn't work out. There could be other local products that we may not be aware of, or they may be, and they may find out, uh, and as a result, some of these products have tanked. And we have had to either pull back, or we have had to come back and do the homework again, or make significant improvements before we relaunch. So it's unless we don't hit a home run every time. So it could be like 1 in 10 it hits a home run right away. But there are 9 out of 10 companies that struggle to get off the ground in overseas market because they don't understand how the clientele is different. In some cases, the purchasing process itself takes 8 to 10 months because they have to go through what they call a tender system. There are other bidders, and so it takes time. It takes a lot of effort, time, but at least I would say in many of the cases it takes at least 1.5 to 2 years before we see significant revenue stream that we can gather from international markets. And that's one of my jobs also is to explain to the principal companies here is don't expect an immediate revenue stream. It's a great product for you, but it may not be a great product for somebody else who may just have peripheral interest initially. But we need to educate them, ensure that they understand the technology and use it appropriately. These things take time, effort, and a significant chunk on their part. It takes money. And at least in the last year or so, the US dollar has been so strong. The exchange rate has been very unfavorable. So the business hasn't really taken off in the last couple of years for some of the company products that we have launched. But, these things will come back at some point. So you need to be patient, need to, take your time to analyze the market and then decide appropriately. So it's as you say, it's 9 out of 10 times it's
Yes.
a challenging opportunity, but it's fun to do, work with players overseas, understand their customers, their sales leaders, and how they differ from country to country. In fact, in some cases, city to city.
Yeah, and having somebody on your side that has dealt with those nuances of international business is pretty important, right? It's you can get yourself into a lot of trouble not understanding the culture and how to deal with somebody from different, not a whole lot of trouble, but it's not always comfortable when you make some of those mistakes. And I've been doing international business for some time, so I've been embarrassed more than once by far. So
it's the same here. So
right.
when we went that first time overseas, we didn't know what to do, whether to shake hands or to bow and things like that. So
Right.
it's a learning process.
So for the young entrepreneurs out there, this is not an overnight thing. You're not going to hit. You might hit success in 1 or 2 days or a couple months, but you're in it for years if this is the path that you're going to take. Right? It's not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's uh, it takes time, and you need to learn.
Yeah.
Our products, we need to understand how the business does, what the culture is, and how we're going to ship it, how we're going to package it, whether it's in dry ice, whether it's in wet ice, and how do you get something that's temperature sensitive out of customs. It's a long process.
Right.
So
I've talked
takes
to
a
very
while.
few business owners that knocks it out of the park in their first year, like handfuls,
Definitely.
right? Just a very small handful that the first year they're like, oh my gosh, everything is fantastic. So I think that's a very, very important message for business owners and especially young entrepreneurs and people that are getting started in this world. there are lots of tools that can escalate it and make it a lot faster than it used to be. But this is still not an idea to profit is not a very clear path all the time. Dr.
Correct.
Ravi,
Fully agree.
if there's somebody out there that is watching the show and they're like, hey, I've got this medical product or this life science product and I want to bring it to market and I'd like to work with Dr. Ravi and his team, how would somebody reach out to you, find you, get more information, or start that process?
Yeah, so they can send me an email at my ravi.vinayak@newtrailconsulting.com, or one of the channels that we have been using, in fact, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very popular with this biotechnology, life science, diagnostic space. So it has got some great groups and things like that. So you can connect with me over there, or you can just email me directly. So I'm happy to discuss opportunities in their space.
Wonderful. And we'll throw all those links up at the bottom of the screen so that people can just click the button and send you an email or view the website and learn more about you and your team and what kind of benefits that you can bring to them. I've had a blast talking with you today, Dr. Ravi. Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with today?
No, thanks for having me, Ken. I'm glad I was able to share some of my experiences with you and with your audience. And if there are any things I can do to help, feel free to reach out to me. But it's been fun, and what I'm doing for the last 10-15 years in terms of international distribution, I would say, has paid off. It's been challenged culturally, professionally, technically, financially, but all of those problems can be overcome if you have enough patience and time and energy. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Get to work.